It's Chelsea,
It's Nina.
and you're in the Critics' Kingdom.
Hello, everyone. Today we are going to be reviewing Jump In! Exclamation point, a 2007 film about starring Corbin Bleu and Keke Palmer. Two favorites, grew up to do
Yes,
great
and
things.
I think this was Keke Palmer's first ever kids show or show on a kids channel. Because I think before this she had only done Aquila and the Bee and that Tyler Perry movie.
Oh yes.
But we love her in Aquila and the Bee. She deserved in that one.
Potentially. I don't distinctly remember tracking Keke Palmer's career, but I do know that I was very this movie. I was slightly too old to watch. Right, or not slightly too old. I was well past my Disney phase because this came out when I was 14. But but I distinctly remember tuning into this film because I was like, oh, what's Keke Palmer? And I like Keke Palmer. It's about Double Dutch. That's cute. Let's get it. So yeah, it was definitely in the wave of Keke Palmer sort of up and coming as a phenomenon of our generation.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I remember definitely watching this movie. I also loved one of the songs in it, which was Jump to the Rhythm. And then also this is where Corbin Bleu had his first hit single with Push It to the Limit. That is from this movie.
That is true.
So yeah, I think I'll get into the recap. But I'm sure most of you are at least somewhat familiar because this was a pretty popular one, I believe, when it came out. Um, so we start off with Izzy, which is Corbin Bleu, who's a boxer, and he lives in Brooklyn with his dad and his little sister. And his dad was also a very well-known neighborhood boxer in Brooklyn, and he won this big award called the Golden Gloves. So obviously he wants Izzy to win as well, and Izzy wants to because he loves boxing. Like him and his dad work together, and his dad is actually his coach, and I think owns the gym that they box at. So, it's in the family and he also loves doing it. So, it's great. And we start off with him in a exhibition match with this guy named Rodney, who we soon find out is the school bully. He's just mean to everybody and he just bothers people and all of that. And Izzy wins actually and beats Rodney. So then everybody's like, oh, oh my gosh, Izzy, you're the greatest, blah, blah, blah. And they make fun of Rodney the next day at school. And they're like, can you get up, Rodney? So Rodney, of course, is immediately like, we need a rematch. I wasn't, that wasn't the right day. My head wasn't right, blah, 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 all the excuses. And Izzy is like, no, dude, I won. There's no take backsies. And so, and while all that's happening, he's home one day on the weekends and he's supposed to hang out with his friends, but his dad is like, you need to take your sister to this double dutch exhibition because she won't shut up about it and I can't do it. So Izzy gets tagged with his little sister, Karen, and he takes her and her 4 or 5 little friends to this double dutch exhibition. While there, he runs into another girl from their neighborhood named Mary, aka Keke Palmer. And her team, who are called the Joy Jumpers, and they're all trying to get their stuff together. They're freaking out because they're like, guys, we're not ready. We're not as good as the Dutch Dragons, who were their big competition. And they're like, I don't think we're going to do very well. And Mary is just like, no, we have to believe in ourselves. Let's at least try. So, they do their best, but they only end up getting 4th. The Dutch Dragons, of course, make fun of them for it. And they also lose one of their main teammates, Yolanda. And Yolanda is like, girl, your moves are whack. She's like, that's why we lost, because the freestyle part that you choreographed is bad, Mary. And so she's like, I'm going to the Dutch Dragons. So then the Joy Jumpers are like, oh my gosh, we're 1 down and we have to have 4 people to compete at the All City, I think it is, the All City competition.
One. Or no, it's the regional. They just qualified for the regionals because the city competition was the one that Izzy takes Karen to.
Yeah.
And so now they have to do the regionals.
Yeah, so they qualified for the regionals and 4th is still qualifying. So they still made it through. They just didn't do very well. As good as they could have. So, Izzy is there while all this is happening. So he's just dying of laughter because he's like, y'all are a mess. And Mary is like, well, if you think you can do it, why don't you try? So he does it, and the thing is, he's a boxer, so he's got great footwork. And he knows what he's doing, so he actually excels and does very well to the surprise of Mary and her teammates. And the other two teammates, unbeknownst to Mary, then go behind her back and are like, "Yo, Izzy, can you like be a temporary team member because like high key we need somebody, and you're really good." And Izzy is he's convinced. He's like, fine, sure, like it'll be like a fun little thing, and like he low key likes Mary, so it'll work out for the two of them. And so he starts going to their practices, but it doesn't initially take it that seriously. And then until Mary like yells at him and is like, "Yo, like this is like what we do. Like you need to take this as seriously as you take your boxing." And he starts getting better and better and better. But all the while he never tells his dad because he knows his dad won't approve. But he starts liking it more and more and more, and actually tells them we need to get a better name because Joy Jumpers sucks. And he's like, we need to become something better, like the Red Hot Chili Steppers. And they're like, ooh, we all like that. So they change their name and they enter into the next competition. And they're supposed to, all four of them are supposed to go and like compete. And it's going to be their first time, like as a foursome competing, since they still haven't found somebody to replace him. And instead that day his dad's like, "Oh, Izzy, I have 2 tickets to a boxing match, like like let's go to this boxing match." And Izzy is like, "Oh, I don't know." And he tries to call Mary's house, but her mom's like, she's already gone to the competition. So he's like, "Yeah, like sure, dad, like I'm not doing anything else." So he ends up going, leaving the girls in a lurch, and they look crazy because there's only 3 of them. So Mary is pissed, rightfully. And she's like, "Okay, don't talk to me. Like, don't do anything with me. Like, I don't want to see you," and fires him from the Red Hot Chili Steppers. And he's like, "Fine, whatever." And all the while, Rodney is again still trying to get this rematch. So he ends up seeing him practicing before they fired him, and puts it all photos of it in the Xerox machine, I'm guessing, because of the time period.
with the pink paper.
With pink paper, and plasters it all over the school so people can see that Izzy enjoys double dutching, and which is quote unquote a girl sport. And everybody starts making fun of him for it, and calling him all these names, and
They're not bad
he
names.
just
They call him Double
it's
Dutch.
not
It's
it's really
literally
not
just
that
Double Dutch,
serious.
and like that's fine.
Yeah, it's like it's fine, but it hurts his ego because he's like 14 or 15.
He's gonna be Double Dutch for the rest of his life, though. I'll tell you that.
Exactly.
That is a great nickname for somebody.
And then he like goes home and he has one of them in his bag, and he ends up like heading out to go somewhere, and his father goes into his room to give him something and sees it. So then his father freaks out because he's like, "What is this? Is this why you've been showing up to practices late and like not being on time or not showing up at all?" Because he was doing double dutch, he couldn't really get to boxing as on time as he used to. So, and his dad's his coach, so obviously everybody knows like he's not there. And he's like, "Yeah, I love the game, and like I like this, and blah blah blah." And his dad's like, "You need to get your head in the game, lol." Throwback to High School Musical. And like focus more on boxing. So Izzy's like, "Yeah, fine." And Mary, actually then goes to him afterward and is like, like, "I'm so sorry that happened, but like, we still actually want you on the team, like we need you, blah blah blah." And he's like, "No," and treats her very coldly, and goes to the boxing rink to like get back into the game. And he meets with one of the boxers, the women boxers, Tammy, and she's like, "Hey, people make fun of me for being a woman boxer all day every day, but like I'm still here, so you got to do what you got to do, sir. If you really like double dutch, double dutch." And he
Jump,
was
Izzy,
like, "You
jump.
know what, Tammy, you're right." And so then he goes back to the ladies of the Red Hot Chili Steppers and is like, "I want to be part of the team, like fully, like I want to do this." Tells his dad and explains it to him, and everybody is like on board. So then they finally go to states, I think, or
Regionals.
whatever the next
They
thing
go
is for
to
regionals.
no, because the other one was a exhibition thing in Harlem that he missed.
Right.
So it wasn't like a part of the like competition. It was just like an exhibition. Look at all these
Okay.
jumpers, and he makes them look a
Yeah.
fool. So they're going to regionals.
Yeah. So then they go to regionals, um and when they're on, before they, like the day before they go, he ends up having he finally has that rematch with Rodney that Rodney's been asking him for. And he basically beats Rodney again, but also beats him with his words because he decides he's going to be like, you're just mad because you don't have a dad, and like
Oh no, isn't his dad
that kind
just
of
broke?
thing.
It's not like he's just really poor.
Yeah, but he like says all that. He doesn't say it in a mean way, but he's like, you feel like you're low because you have low self-esteem, like that kind of thing that like Disney thinks actual people would say to a bully. That would never work.
Never worked.
And all while they're in a boxing ring.
That gets the
So
teeth
there's a
knocked
point
out.
where he could like KO Rodney, but he doesn't. He just leaves. And that's when he's like, okay, I'm gonna go back with my Red Hot Chili Girls. And so then the next day they end up having regionals, and all of his friends support him. His dad and Karen are there. Everybody's there. And they do this new freestyle routine that Izzy was the one who actually found, because he just saw some girls like doing double dutch for fun, like on the streets, and was like, we need to do this. We need to make this more fun. Like, that's the problem with your routine, Karen, is it's too buttoned up. Like, it's so serious. We need to make like the double dutch fun. And so they do this new freestyle routine, which is much more fun. And this is where they perform to push it to the limit. And there's no jumping involved, which okay.
They really just do a straight up
So let's just
break out into
belief
choreography, which like
they literally break out into choreography, as Nina said. And they perform and they end up getting first place and going to the city regional or state, sorry, state. They end up, yeah, like all these different, sure. They go to whatever the next level is of competition. And Rodney also is there, and he like actually apologizes to Izzy and is like, yo, I'm sorry, you were right, I am just poor. And
I'm just a broke boy, that's all it is.
And so that's basically how it ends, and they all are back together, and Mary and Izzy have a little thing going on now, and it's cute. He's still a Red Hot Chili Stepper, and everybody's aware and knows that he can do both. He is a man that does both. And Rodney
was narrating the whole time.
Yeah, and then we find out, we see like the scene pulls out, and we see Rodney talking to these kids at the boxing rink, and he was telling them the whole story of Izzy and Mary and all of this going on, because he's older now and learned. And
he's helping the babies understand.
And helping the babies, giving them a parable to go by. And yeah, let's jump in. We'll be right back with the recap or the review. Sorry. Yeah.
So for the review, this movie it was cute then, I think, and I think it's still kind of cute. I first and foremost really appreciate. I think that there's a level of what feels like authenticity to it, even though they're clearly not in Brooklyn. Like, it is so obviously Toronto, because like Brooklyn just don't look like that. But I think the kids for the most part, look and sound like they're from Brooklyn, which is nice. And like, I don't know, sort of just like the flavor of speech is captured pretty well, which is not always the case with films that are attempting to show like people in Black neighborhoods, essentially.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, like even there's a little line where when Izzy and his dad are like starting to like fight a little bit, because his mom is dead or has been dead for what, like 2 years or something of that nature, and his dad is clearly having a hard time processing that. And we see it in ways of like. We see it in a few different ways, but I do appreciate when it sort of comes to a head and Izzy and his dad sort of get into a little bit of a fight, and Karen is there and she starts to say something. Izzy tells her to shut up. She's like, "Shut don't go up, prices do." I was like, that's just like, I remember being 8 and doing things like that, saying things like that, and I just appreciated seeing that reflected back to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think like they really got the flavor right on this one, as you said. And yeah, it just felt very authentic. It really reminded me of how the Cheetah Girls felt, actually, like where the first one specifically, where it was like, it's a New York story, and even if it wasn't shot there, it still feels like it is. And even, I think you were describing like the fact that a lot of when they start like getting close, Izzy and Karen, or Mary, sorry, not Karen, Karen's a sister. Izzy and Mary, when they start getting close, a lot of it's happening on like fire escapes because they live in Brooklyn, so they would be in apartments, even though they have brownstones. But it's
They
we don't have to
really
talk about
built
that.
that. They
There are
really
fire
built it
escapes
up like
involved, though.
it was a labyrinth. It was not a fire escape. You would burn on that fire escape. But
You would.
but yeah, like it is very, I don't know, like this movie like brought back fond memories for me in various ways. But yes, I did really appreciate the way that they sort of showed this love story. And in fact, actually, what it reminds me a lot too is of like the first quarter of Love and Basketball.
Mm.
Like, and I mean, like it's a trope, it's a romance trope, like this idea of like, especially when you live close, like neighbors, and this kind of like staring out through the window situation. But like, I know for a fact, having grown up in Brooklyn, that like the young love of Brooklyn, like it exists on places like, or in places like fire escapes, and on the stoops of brownstones, and on like the rooftops of apartment buildings and subway platforms, and like building staircases, like all of these sort of in between, like very, like you might get someone like a basketball court situation, but it's not like out in fields and stuff, or like even in like high school hallways and stuff like that. It's like a lot of it, for whatever reason, like we like stairs and sort of like places that end up feeling secluded in like urban areas. But I just appreciated that whole, just watching that unfold. I was like, this is super cute. We also loved that it was a dark skinned female lead. That all the girls were like dark. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was,
Yeah. No,
it was,
that
I
I
was like,
think
that's
that
also
was.
accurate for Brooklyn.
I wonder if they actually had a black casting director on this one.
It feels
I
like
did.
the
I didn't
writers
look.
were also black. Like it feels like it was
The
like,
right, yeah, no, the writers were. I remember I looked up one of them. She was black. Because I feel like a lot of this would not have been nearly as accurate had I think if you did not have black writers. Because even on one part we were talking about, they start playing what is probably fake and then kind of techno dubstep version of like Caribbean music, but you can still hear,
yeah,
the Caribbean part of it. Like as soon as I heard it, I was like, this is Caribbean influence, but it's like you at least attempted,
yeah. And
more than
that
a lot of
is,
movies do.
and you would hear that like in Brooklyn, you're gonna hear a lot more. Like it's just, it's a very common sound that you
Right,
hear coming
right.
from various places at all times. And especially if he's living in a neighborhood where people are like boxing and stuff like that, and the girls play double, like yeah, that's something that's heard. Quite.
To be expected.
So yeah, it was just like, I guess in that vein too. Like I know, and I mean, like like both of my parents are still thankfully alive, but I know Chelsea and I, like we both had a little, because since their mom is dead in this, like his dad is now trying to take up doing certain things like cooking, and in a particular scene that I know spoke directly to Chelsea and I, where he tries to do his daughter's hair and is crazy, and she just looks at her brother like, please help me, like please make this okay. But like I distinctly remember like the one and only time my father ever touched my head as a child, and I like told my mom, I was like, this is just not gonna work. Like, I understand that you're going to college now, I understand you're trying to better yourself, sure, he cannot do my hair. That is that is unacceptable.
No, it's
So,
it's so true. I think that's why Matthew A. Cherry's short film Hair
yeah,
Love at the Oscars in 20, was that 2020 or
I
2019?
think
I think it's
2019,
2019.
2019.
Yeah. But I think that's why it hit so hard,
Yeah,
because it's such a real thing. Like I was telling I was like, my dad, I think, did my hair maybe once, but it's ironic because my dad used to have a fro and like plaited it every night. So I was like, why would you not just be able to
why can't it transfer?
why can't it transfer? But yeah, so I think that was a nice moment. I even, his dad overall, like he was a very loving father and clearly listened to both of his kids and was just trying to do his best
Yeah,
um as a dad.
as a single dad, a newly single dad.
Yeah, newly single father. So I thought that was definitely good. And I think something else that you had kind of brought up was that them picking Double Dutch as the focus of this movie as the sport in this movie was interesting, just because it doesn't have a similar history or background as a lot of the other sports, like when they've done skateboarding or rollerblading or skiing and snowboarding. Those are very, I think, traditionally white sports that were
Um,
gatekept depending on where you are. Not all of them, but I think a lot of them may not have. They didn't start the same way. I think Double Dutch is a very specific one.
well, yeah, and I think it was I think a bit more so that or what struck me about it more so was that I think Double Dutch lives in it lives in an interesting space in the world of like sports films for Disney Channel original movies because you have sports films that are about sort of very large mainstream societal sports, with national leagues that have had national leagues for like many decades. You have your basketball, you have your drag racing, or your like NASCAR driving. um you have like figure skating, like you have all of these sports that are like recognized, right? And then on the other side you have like you said, like the skateboarding, the rollerblading, like were new sports in the public eye, like they were coming into, but they were new sports, period. You know what I mean? Like the skateboard was like a new thing, and
Mm-hmm.
kids like started getting them and then turning them into sports, right? And like extreme explaining, like all of that stuff, like kids were getting these toys and then making these toys, like creating athletic prowess with that, and then like that started to be recognized. Double Dutch lives in an interesting space because it is something that I would argue, and this is kind of part of the whole like fond memories thing too. Double Dutch, in the like, I'm not going to speak for everyone, but like in New York City, in the Black community, like Double Dutch has a very long standing tradition. And it's an example of a sport that has like always existed to a specific community for a very long time, for as long as basketball and all those things. But it is just now being recognized as potential as a sport. As So it's not like it's a new thing. As long as there have been wires, like there has been Double Dutch, As long as there's been something you can as long as there's been something you can jump rope with in Brooklyn, like there's been Double Dutch. And it's been taken like kind of seriously, and it's like, can you do tricks on the playground and stuff like that? Like it's been taken sort of seriously in that way by that group of people. It's just now getting like a recognition on a larger scale. And so I just thought that was an interesting space for it to live in. Also, just because it did, like I think I said it to you, Chelsea, as we were watching it, like I love the part at the end where we see his dad, where they're like they're doing double dutch in the street, and we see that his dad is like trying to jump double dutch too. Because like what I liked of this movie, and we see that like his little sister like really looks up to Mary, and like looks up to Mary and her double dutch team, because like that was a direct I was seeing a direct experience reflected back to me that I'd had as a like little girl growing up in Brooklyn. And on my playground, like I know that double dutch was this weird, like it was the space where like I learned to double dutch from the teenage girls at the park. Like that was that direct line of like this was an actual tradition, like passed down to me, handed down to me. And like my friends with parents who had like, or specific, like often with mothers, but like with parents who had been in Brooklyn for any period of time, or who like didn't just come into Brooklyn when they were older, like they would be like, "Oh yeah, like we love to double dutch," and like they would come out sometimes and like double dutch with us. It just like it has this long standing tradition, um, that is a fundamental part of like community building, and like like the Black woman's community building in Brooklyn and New York and such. And yeah, it was just like really, I think that they just managed to weave that in a strong way, and I appreciated that. And it was a nostalgic film for me for that reason.
Yeah, no, I think Double Dutch is, even when we were looking up, because I was trying to figure out, I was like, where did this come from? Like who who kind of invented this, and where did this come from? And like there were mixed sources, because some people were like, oh, it was like a Dutch thing, and then it came over with like the immigrants and then basically became like an African American like childhood sport for many black girls. Um, but obviously, I don't know if that's 100% true, but I do know 100% that it was a very popular sport amongst like African American black girls for years. I
Still,
think
it
there's even
still is,
photos
I
from
would
like
argue.
Gordon Parks in like the 50s and the 60s of girls double dutching.
Yeah.
So it's like existed for it's a lineage, like you were saying, just all over the country. It's just one of those things, and I even had a really big part in early rap music and
Yeah, like in the
funk
videos.
with like the
Yeah.
fact that electric slide double dutch bus, like it's like there's a whole thing. And KRS1, sorry, had his song about like double, like included double dutching, but it's like it's part of AAVE at this point, I would say. Like it's just in the vernacular.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a very interesting culturally specific sport that they chose to cover. I feel like the closest you could probably get would have been in Luck of the Irish with river dancing, but they didn't focus on the river dancing.
Yeah.
Um so yeah, it's interesting, and I think they did it very well considering. And yeah, I mean, I think overall it's a very good movie. It's still cute. We still enjoyed it
Yeah.
even now. And it's always fun seeing young Keke Palmer, young Corbin Bleu, fresh off of his High School Musical
Yeah. And
um
isn't Beyonce's cousin
thing.
in this too? She plays.
Yeah, I don't know if it's Shanika or if it's Shanika Knowles is in this, and I solely knew that because I saw this horrible Lifetime movie called Megachurch Murder that starred her, Lil Romeo, and Malcolm Jamal Warner. That's the only reason and I was like, wait, is that Shanika Knowles? And I was like, it is. Um, but also I think a good point that Nina made earlier is that all of the girls in this, besides his little sister,
But even
are
she is,
dark
yeah,
skinned,
yeah,
and
dark skin.
she's brown, but she's not dark. Like,
Yeah.
like I
Right.
wouldn't put her in that category.
But she is clearly a black child.
She is brown. Yeah,
Like,
she is a
very clearly
brown
a black
skinned girl. She is brown. She's not like she's slightly lighter, but she is not like light skinned. So but all the women in this movie are like dark skinned or brown. And it feels very intentional, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Especially for a DCOM, and with all the issues we've discussed with DCOMs and the colorism issues, it is nice
Yeah,
to see
refreshing.
that.
Which is probably also why I was like 14, but I was like, all right, like I'll watch it. You know what I mean? Like I'll give it again. Like, yeah, why not? Looks like they're trying to do something properly for once. And yeah, and I mean like that all that to say, like it's still a decom. You know what I mean? Like it's still a little corny, it's still a little, you know, it still has its moments that like you're like, well, this isn't this isn't quite right. But overall I would say like it was just something that, yeah, I don't know, I just enjoyed it. I like the concept in it, of like of finding your rhythm, and of the way that like skills can transfer. Like we talked about this on before, but just like seeing that like skills can transfer, and that like there's an emphasis on the idea of just like, make it fun. Like if it's not, like, you're still kids, and if you're not having fun while you're doing it, maybe you should consider looking into something else, or maybe you should consider like going back to why you started liking it in the first place, and like find that energy again. Because I do think, we've talked about this before, but I think we do live in a world where kids are under a lot of pressure. Um, Whether that's self-imposed or it's coming from outside, like there's just a lot of pressure to sort of excel and to just be something incredible, and to have all the money in the world and all of this stuff. And it's nice to just see a reminder of like, yeah, but have fun, like still have fun. There are years and years and years to like stress and be buttoned up and have to follow the rules, and like right now you don't have any rules, or you have much less than you will later on. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I also agree that I think we've talked about many times before, is how like a lot of DCOMs paint you as only being able to do one thing. And literally paint you into that corner. So it was nice to see one where it's like he can do two things. And like, I mean, I guess everybody was shocked because I think this goes back to the conversation we had with Gotta Kick It Up and quote unquote female sports versus quote unquote male sports.
Yeah.
And how double dutch is seen as a female or a woman sport versus like something like boxing, which is very masculine and associated with men. Um, and so I did like that they touched on that, and then especially having Tammy, the woman boxer, like tell him like, look, I'm in something that's like the opposite of, what people think I should be doing, and like you just kind of gotta, brush your shoulders off and deal with it if
Yeah.
you want. But if you love it, do what you want to do. So yeah, and it's also just nice to have a young man listening to women around him.
Yeah.
I think that's just also just an overall nice thing. He listened to Tammy, he listens to Mary. He gets annoyed by his little sister, but he still listens to her. Um, and it
She
was
really does tell him about himself quite regularly, and I
she does.
appreciate that.
She does. She clearly keeps him in check, and it's just nice to see, a character that has a modicum of that has like respect for the women around him
Yeah.
and clearly values them as much as his male friends,
For sure.
which is not typical. So yeah. But yeah, I think with that, do you think you would show this one to your kids?
Yeah, I think that we'd like put like more likely than not, like I don't know if it's going to be like first on the list or even 10th on the list, but it's definitely it's fun, it's nostalgic. Like I would love, like I would imagine that, like, my kids at this time like have interacted with Double Dutch in some way, shape, or form. It might not be me turning the ropes because I am left-handed and I do fucking turn double-handed. Like I really wish I didn't, but it's my great shame. Um, but like I would hope that they like had some experience and that this would be a thing of them seeing like how cool it could be and all of that stuff, and maybe a place for me to like talk to them about like growing up in Brooklyn, and um especially because I think that so much of the conversations around growing up in like pre-gentrified Brooklyn end up circling around like dark things or not good
Yeah.
things. And this is something where I can talk to them about like, oh yeah, like no, like this is what like we used to play, like, touch football on the court, and we used to we used to have races around the thing, and yeah, we used to sit like at grandma's building, like we used to sit and like watch the girls play double dutch, and they would teach us and did it like it's just a way to get into like a different, because this is the word of the day, I guess, flavor of the experience of like growing up in what would be called the hood, or what would be called like a not socioeconomically great place, but like all of the things that can flourish in those spaces, even though like there are other things that might be lacking.
Yeah, and I think overall what this movie shows is care. Like
Yeah, yeah,
I feel like that's like I because I feel like we've watched a lot of movies where there is no care shown, and this is a great example of what happens, I think, when you have the people who are in that group write their own stories, but then also when said people care, because just because you have a black person writing a black story does not necessarily make it good. Let's
mm-mm,
put that out
that's
there.
very true.
Um or of any specific ethnic group, you have a woman's writing a woman's story, X, Y, and Z. So you also have to make sure that that person cares, and clearly I think everybody that was involved with this one like really cared and really wanted to make it as accurate as they could within the confines of like what would work for Disney.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell like it's just the little things, and then also picking something like we said so culturally specific, and then the choosing of the cast, how things are done, the light, musical influences, all of that. And um you can just tell, and it comes through the screen in a good way. So yeah, I definitely think I would watch this one with my kids. Still fun, still great. Also just two black leads falling in, like, that like each other.
Yeah.
Um and there's no weird anything involved in that. And yeah, just like, just seeing like these girls like make what they want to happen.
Yeah.
Um it's just always a good thing to like, hammer on home. And obviously, the father is a great father too. He's
Yeah.
not bumbling. Um which is always interesting because I feel like we haven't really seen a bumbling black father. Somebody like mentioned that to me the other day from like my job, and I was like, that's actually a really good point. It's like black men are not allowed to not know what's going on
Yeah.
as dads. Moms too, but I feel like you typically see like bumbling fathers and like the mom knows everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, this one fell into that tradition of like the dad does literally everything because he absolutely needs to and he's great at
Yeah.
it.
All right. So I guess with that, we will catch you guys next week.
Bye. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of The Critics Kingdom. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify and SoundCloud so you can stay up to date, as well as interacting and letting us know what you guys think on social media. You can find us on Twitter at Critics Kingdom and on Instagram at The Critics Kingdom. We're excited to talk to you again next week.